complex web of relationships rules all life on Earth. All species are interconnected. None can survive in isolation. While some relationships are one-sided, others are mutually beneficial. From loose associations to tight-knit partnerships. Everything has a place in nature's great scheme. The summer sun is baking the savannas of Africa. It's hot and dusty, and by mid-afternoon, the mercury has pushed over 100 degrees. Seeking relief from the thermal onslaught, this white rhino is heading for his local watering hole. Wallowing in the cool mud comforts the overheated male. He's not only hot, but also bothered by an infestation of blood-sucking ticks. The mud bath helps all round. The clay-like covering forms a hard crust when baked in the sunshine, allowing the rhino to rub himself down, knocking off the ticks. But this mud bath has another unexpected benefit. A group of very unusual beauticians is hard at work. They're African helmeted turtles. Ever the opportunists, today they're nipping ticks from the cracks and crevices of the giant's wrinkled old hide. Two animals mutually benefiting each other may seem unusual. But all across the continent, there are animals cooperating in a complex web of life. On the grassy savannas surrounding the waterhole, another mutually beneficial association is common. Cattle egrets are foraging alongside a herd of impala. They're after the bugs disturbed in the grass by the churning hooves. It's a clever strategy. Egrets following large grazers like this Cape buffalo catch up to 40% more prey than lone foragers. The benefits to the grazers, however, aren't as clear, although it's thought that the birds may operate as an early warning system when predators are near. Such teamwork is an integral part of life across Africa. From the great herds of the grassy savannas to the freshwater lakes, where flocks of birds numbering into the thousands congregate to reap the bountiful food rewards. Along its coastline, fish schools patrol the depths. While the surface boils with giant pods of common dolphins. These aggregations of individuals have multiple benefits. The more eyes looking out for predators, the better. And finding food in a group is often easier than going it alone. This is particularly true when different species work together. One of the best examples of loosely cooperating individuals of different species takes place on the open grasslands of East Africa. Here, great herds of wildebeest and zebra congregate on the golden plains to feast on the bountiful grass. While this looks like a random gathering, there is actually a specific organization in the way the two species operate. Both are grazers. But even though they live side by side, they target slightly different parts of the grass they eat. Zebras move through first, munching the tallest grasses. Their digestive system is capable of breaking down a variety of food, including old, dry, low-quality grass. In their wake come blue wildebeest, which are better adapted to eating shorter, more nutritious shoots. This relationship allows the two grazers to coexist. Complex interactions between species are not limited to animals, and some of the best examples occur in the lush mountain forests of Africa. From the treetops to the forest floor, light governs the fortunes of everything that lives here. The taller you are, the more you have. Trees invest in giant trunks to support a wide canopy high above the ground, ensuring they get the lion's share of sunshine. But one group has evolved a more cost-effective way to rise above the masses. These are epiphytes, otherwise known as air plants. They're a group of plants that all grow in the same way. Instead of using their own energy to reach the sunlight, they hitch a ride on strong, towering trees. orchids are probably the best-known epiphytes. Their specially adapted roots anchor the plants to the trunk of their host. And as the tree grows, the air plant gets closer to the sun. But the roots are only for support. The plants are completely harmless, absorbing all the nutrients and water they need from the air or falling leaf litter trapped by their stems and roots on the trunk. Recent studies suggest that they actually confer some benefits to the trees on which they grow. In the forest, water is critical, and trees that are able to get more of it, or conserve the amount they have the best, grow better. It's thought that epiphytes increase the canopy density, creating a significantly cooler and moister microclimate. So the trees lose less water through their leaves. It seems that epiphytes may not simply be taking their unwitting hosts for a free ride after all. On the high Simien Mountains of Ethiopia, another epiphyte species has a more complicated relationship. Up here in the pure mountain air, fog and rain are common. Bizarre creatures and mystical trees dot the landscape. Across the grassy slopes, giant troops of geladas graze the sweet green grass. Surrounded by trees, hung with lichen or old man's beard, like characters out of the Lord of the Rings. The lichen is a sign of the environment's good health. At the faintest whiff of pollution, it dies off. While lichen also uses trees to reach into the light, the real magic of this species lies in another, much closer relationship. Lichens are actually not one single species, but two, an algae and a fungus. The lives of these are so closely woven that they now appear as one. Fungi can't make their own food through photosynthesis. So they've evolved in partnership with a unicellular species of green algae. The algae photosynthesize, turning sunlight into sugars, which feed the fungi, while the fungus offers support and protection to the microscopic partner nestled in its tissues. This tight-knit relationship is critical to both species, and they've married their fortunes together for life. If one dies, so does the other. A close, mutually beneficial relationship such as this is known as mutualism. Mutualism is so successful, it's created some of the most incredible biological structures on Earth. These occur under the sea, in the warm tropical waters of the Indian Ocean. colourful reefs abound in its clear blue waters. These are some of the most diverse habitats on Earth. Fish life is prolific. All life on these reefs relies on the unbreakable relationship between coral polyps and microscopic algae living inside their tissues. To the naked eye, coral looks like a single animal. But, like the lichen, it's actually two different organisms. During photosynthesis, the algae produces sugars and lipids. And the polyp feeds on these, using this free food to build the impressive calcium carbonate skeletons that are the very foundation of coral reefs. As they've strived for the essential sunlight they need, coral species have diversified into a number of different forms. Pillars, plates, staghorns and brains, all governed by the desire for light. Every conceivable habitat is used on the busy reefs. Even some that would ordinarily be considered extremely hazardous. The venom-laden tentacles of an anemone are suicide for most fish. A 2-bar clownfish is surrounded. Remarkably, he's safe. An impervious blanket of mucus covering the clownfish protects them from being stung. But they're no freeloaders and will defend the anemones against predators including nudibranchs, sea stars, and other fish. They also help pick parasites from the surface of their host. And on calm nights, their hustle and bustle keeps water moving through the anemones, ensuring there's plenty of oxygen. Other sea anemones have struck a different sort of partnership. They've hitched a ride on the shell of a hermit crab. This provides meals for the anemones, which catch bits of food that escape the crab's claws. In return, the crab uses the anemone's stinging tentacles to ward off predators. So it's win-win. There's another win-win relationship in the heathlands of southern Africa. Across this floral wonderland, a battle for procreation is part of everyday life. Many plant species here throw their spawn to the wind, using wind power to pollinate. This is simple, but can be unreliable, so some species prefer not to leave it up to chance. They invest their energy in creating sweet nectar and brightly colored flowers to attract pollinators such as sunbirds or sugarbirds. One such group of flowers are Proteas. Their colorful flowers are like beacons, luring sunbirds with the promise of nectar. As the birds feed, they become dusted with pollen, which they carry from flower to flower as they seek out more nectar. In turn, the sugary nectar helps fuel the high metabolism of the birds as they flit from bush to bush. Plants have been particularly good at forging these kinds of relationships. On the west coast of southern Africa, every spring brings an explosion of life. In a blush of color, the plants open their flowers in order to attract pollinators. This is their breeding season. Flowers of all colors and shapes proliferate. There's lots of competition for suitable pollinators. To increase their odds in the race, the Medestert plant has invested in super long flowers to lure a very special pollinator. It's a long-tongued or tangle-veined fly. His proboscis measures 2 inches or more. This has co-evolved over time alongside the flowers. As one got longer, so too did the other, eventually resulting in an exclusive partnership between the flower and the fly. But this is not without its risks. All bets are on one horse in the race to reproduce. So the plants have evolved a clever system to ensure success. Each flower offers the fly only a small sip of nectar. To get it, he must insert his proboscis up to the hilt. And as he does so, he's rubbed with pollen. But with only a small amount of nectar in each flower, the fly must move from plant to plant in order to get all that he needs. He'll visit hundreds of different flowers in a day, distributing pollen as he goes. This intricate relationship is mutually beneficial to both species. The flower guarantees the services of a dedicated pollinator, while the fly need not share his precious nectar with any other insect species in the area. But not all close relationships involving two species are mutually beneficial. In many cases, one species takes things one step too far, negatively affecting their hapless victim in the process. This is the dark world of parasitism. A herd of African buffalo is resting through the heat of the day. Like the rhino, they're suffering from infestations of parasites. Nature's selfish freeloaders. Ticks are arguably the most iconic parasites in the world, familiar to any household pet owner. These depend on their ability to suck the blood of others. After gorging herself on blood, this African blue tick has mated and fallen from her host into the grass below. For her, life is practically over. Her last task before shriveling away is laying around 2,000 eggs, each the size of a needlehead. It's now up to the next generation. Instinct drives the nymphs up into the long grass. Here they'll wait for passing mammals. It's a tenuous existence, and the wait is long and often futile. Most will fail to find a passing animal within a few months and die. Nymphs can detect increasing levels of carbon dioxide, which indicate the presence of a nearby host. If the animal approaches close enough, the youngsters swarm aboard, like pirates raiding a passing treasure galleon. Ticks are arachnid invertebrates, distantly related to spiders. Their specialized mouth parts enable them to pierce thick hide and suck blood from a range of animal hosts. More than 1,000 ticks can congregate on a single individual. Once aboard, however, blue ticks only latch onto one animal for their entire life. They'll pass through every stage of development while attached, and once the females have mated, they swell up with eggs and drop off their host, resetting the process once more. Parasitism is not limited to the animal kingdom. Many plants have evolved to take a similar advantage of defenseless hosts. Vine-like lianas are one such species that thrives in the forests of Africa. Like epiphytes, they too have hitched a ride on trees into the sunlight high up in the canopy above. Unlike the air plants, however, lianas are rooted in the soil. And the presence of lianas comes at a cost to their host. Trees hung with lianas grow more slowly. The vines also allow small herbivores, such as this millipede, to move from tree to tree as they feed up in the canopy. While this benefits hungry herbivores, it's bad news for the host. Lianas have been shown to increase tree mortality and reduce the host's seeds and fruits. Out of the forest, on the heathland-covered slopes, another parasite invades a host. But unlike many of the species inside the forest, it's not hitching a ride. This tangle of bright green stems is a mistletoe. But there's no romantic Christmas tradition in this relationship. It's stealing the very lifeblood from its host. The mistletoe's roots penetrate the host's stem, taking food and water. Where the roots penetrate the bark, a thick callus forms as the host plant attempts to fight back. But to no avail. The parasitic plant uses its stolen bounty to produce sweet fruits, which are sought after by birds. These then carry the seeds to other plants before depositing them in their droppings on the next host. But the mistletoe can't take too much, or they'll kill their victim. Most successful parasites steal just the right amount, allowing their host to survive. Few kill, for in most cases, they're completely dependent on their hosts. If the host dies, so do they. The matapalo, or tree killer, is a notable exception, otherwise known as the strangler fig. As its name suggests, its life is born from the death of another. This parasite starts out in the canopy. Birds and other fruit eaters deposit fig seeds where they germinate in the uppermost leaves of the host. These harmless origins soon take a dark turn. Over the years, as the fig grows, clinging to the host tree for support, its roots slowly creep down the trunk on their way to the earth to take root. Once the roots embed in the soil, the game's soon over for the host. With a firm base, the strangler fig takes over. It begins developing a strong trunk of its own, smothering its original crutch. As it grows in strength, it also sucks up most of the nutrients and water meant for the host tree, eventually strangling the tree that gave it life. Most strangler figs have hollow cores. Dark and beautiful, they're all that remains of their smothered host. Not all deadly parasites are forest giants. And one of the world's most notorious thrives along the coastline of southern Africa. But it can't be seen. This is Boulders Beach, 18 miles south of Cape Town. One of only 3 mainland breeding colonies of African penguins. This population is growing, but the species as a whole is on the brink of extinction. While investigating their decline, scientists made a surprising discovery. the penguins were suffering from a microscopic parasite in their blood that is a form of malaria. This is closely related to the illness that affects humans. And it's also spread by mosquitoes. Once infected, the penguins, like humans, experience depression, vomiting, and have difficulty breathing. Death often follows. At a seabird rehabilitation facility, these orphan chicks have been rescued from the colony. Their parents were struck down by malaria. The center raises these youngsters, preparing them to be released into the wild. Microscopic parasites such as malaria cause havoc around the world. Millions are spent each year treating victims, including penguins. Having survived their foster home, these penguins are able to return to the wild. As they waddle free, their future looks good. Even if some of the locals are anything but welcoming. Within minutes, the released birds have mingled into the crowds, swimming free once more in the oceans of southern Africa. Parasites, by definition, benefit at the expense of their hosts. But sometimes they aren't the only ones that get an advantage. One microscopic parasite has had a surprisingly positive impact across the tropical savannas of Africa. It's carried by tsetse flies. Tsetses are bloodsuckers, but in their saliva they carry deadly trypanosoma parasites, which cause sleeping sickness. These tiny worm-like flukes swim through the blood, causing illness. Sleeping sickness kills off intruders not co-evolved to survive the rigors of tropical Africa. Humans, horses, and cattle are all at risk. An area about the size of the US, spanning the equator, is affected. But this threat has been a bonus for natural ecosystems. Humans had to avoid tsetse-infected areas throughout history. This left large tracts of Africa relatively wild and untouched. And many of these regions became the original African national parks and reserves because the land couldn't be used for cattle farming. Without these parasites, the relentless destruction of the continent brought on by farming would have continued unabated. Now researchers monitor the spread of the illness carefully and continuously check herds in the surrounding areas for infections. Although there are treatments and strict control measures to reduce tsetse flies across Africa, the benefits of this parasite to conservation will be felt for many generations to come. While some parasites are beneficial and even necessary, for most animals, bloodthirsty ticks are simply unwanted irritants. All mammals are affected. Even the tallest don't rise above the swarms. Luckily, help is at hand. Red-billed oxpeckers target ticks on large mammals by scissoring through their fur with their beaks. The birds get a meal, and the giraffes get rid of some pests. But even this relationship is not as clear-cut as it seems. For many years, it was thought that oxpeckers only benefited large mammals by removing ticks. But new research has challenged this. Oxpeckers also peck at sores and lesions on their host's skin. Now it's thought that they may actually be after the blood inside engorged ticks, rather than the ticks themselves. And if bloody cuts and grazes are available, the birds happily feed on these as well. The more the oxpecker jabs at the bloody wound, the slower it heals, and the risks of infection increase. This macabre feeding habit has earned them the nickname vampire birds, and makes the birds parasites. In nature's never-ending web of relationships, the helper can become the harmer in the blink of an eye. Lurking in the forests is another example of the duplicitous nature of some organisms. Bracket fungi are hugely beneficial to natural systems. They feed on dead and decaying trees, recycling valuable nutrients back into the environment. Fungi form their own biological kingdom, with more species than vertebrates and plants combined. Although they look like plants, fungi can't photosynthesize, so they must form partnerships with other organisms, such as in the lichens, or they must feed on other organic material. Some species attack large living trees, sucking valuable nutrients from the gentle forest giants. Bracket fungi species such as these are seldom lethal, and the trees tolerate the unwanted adornments, tapping into their trunks way below the canopy. Another species of parasitic fungi has, however, been pressed into service by conservationists in South Africa. As humans moved around the planet, they intentionally and unwittingly introduced new species to the places they visited. Sometimes with disastrous consequences. Some plant species take to their new homes too well and rapidly expand into a nuisance. These are called invaders. One such species is threatening large tracts of the endangered fynbos heathlands of southern Africa. Black wattle, a type of acacia, was introduced into South Africa because its bark was used for tanning leather. Now, huge areas of the region are covered by these invasive trees, crowding out native species. To help combat the invasion, researchers turned to a natural parasite of the trees in their home country, Australia. A rust-colored tumor-like growth or fungal gall. After establishing there was no risk to any indigenous species, conservationists began spraying dense acacia stands with the parasite. The galls don't kill their hosts, but they do dramatically affect growth and seed set, helping slow the spread of this vicious invader. The galls reduce the tree densities of infected sites by 80%. Parasites attack the underbelly of all environments, causing harm to their hosts. But in the right hands, even the worst can be used for good. Every creature faces life as an individual, but rarely alone. All species on the planet are deeply connected in a delicate web of interactions. While some are clearly understood, others are not, reinforcing the need to think of our world not as a collection of isolated individuals, but as a large, magical, mysterious whole. Far more complex than the simple sum of its parts.